All right, let's see what is fresh off the press this morning. We begin with the Daily Nation, and this is a story that has been headlining the pages of the news media since then, and it's all about the Iran war. Why Ruto took sides on Iran war is what is the splash on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Backlash, it says. Oil and gas prices are surging with conflicts disrupting global supplies. There's this niggling worry about this global tensions that is rising right now as Kenyans trapped in Middle East speak out. Diplomacy after President Ruto's apparent criticism of Tehran for targeting other countries. The Foreign Affairs Ministry has clarified that Kenya is opposed to the spread of violence. Beyond the main protagonists, you have the story well fleshed out for you on page 4, 5, 6, 7, and 20 of today's publication. And you can see a related picture there, the devastation, smoke bellowing after an Israeli strike on Beirut's and southern suburbs yesterday following an escalation between Hezbollah and Israel amid the US-Israeli conflict with Iran. And we are worried about this. Of course, everyone is, and how the devastation is going to contract the supplies. We can see as for now, the latest that we do have is also the Strait of Hormuz has been closed. And so this will mean rerouting all this ship, and all that routes will take longer and it will be expensive. And this is bound also to be affecting our pockets as we know it. And again, we have our trade partnership with Iran. We have around 56 billion shillings that is going to, or 5.6 billion shillings that is going to be affected because of this. That is our tea export to Iran. Still on the front page of the Daily Nation, from Artur brothers to Sudan's RSF immigration boss in passport saga. And we have here Miss Evelyn Cheluget, the Director General of Immigration Services, by virtue of our post, faces scrutiny after reports that a Sudan paramilitary leader was given a Kenyan passport. The case rekindles her past role in the issuance of work permits to notorious Armenian brothers. This story is on page 10 of the Daily Nation this morning. Also looking at the back page of the Daily Nation, local agency makes major step in fighting against doping menace is what we have on the back page of the Daily Nation this morning. You know, and it has been, of course, a catnip issue when we talk about the passport saga. And now they're dialing back the time machine, going back to the Armenian brothers, if you may remember, and how they were invading some of the media houses. People wondering, who are these Armenian brothers truly? They're untouchable, you know, and they have all this audacity and temerity to showcase, you know, arrogance that is just beyond, it beggars description. And people doggedly followed, and they saw, okay, there's actually some very powerful people in the country, in the upper reaches of government, who are behind the Armenian brothers. So once we see these passports, and of course this is a very sacred document, this is what I identify me as a Kenyan, and I'm proud of it, and I see it also in some faces where this is not Kenya again and is attached to atrocities around Africa when we're talking about Sudan and what has been happening, the man's inhumanity there. We are bound to really worry. You can follow this story inside the Daily Nation today. We shall also be discussing this around the whole saga of peace and humanity, especially when we talk to Lema Agbowi from Nigeria. She's a Nobel laureate, of course, winner, and she's been that votary of peace in Liberia, where there have been tensions between the Christians and the Muslims since 2003. So this will really resonate with her as far as the war is concerned, and the passports sagas as well. On your side?
All right, Taifa Leo still talks about what's happening in Iran. Masaibu ya Wakenya waliokwama vitani. Anasema kwamba ni hofu wa Kenya ni kati ya raia wa kigeni na wenyeji katika mataifa ya Mashariki ya Kati wasioruhusiwa kutoka majumbani mwao hata kurejea katika nchi zao hawawezi, kwani safari nyingi za ndege ni marufuku. Hofu ni tele kutokana na mashambulizi ya Iran dhidi ya kambi za jeshi za Amerika katika ukanda huo. Hayo yanajiri huku Ruto akionekana kuunga Amerika. Habari kamili katika ukurasa wa pili na 8 wa gazeti hili. Takriban Wakenya 1400 wanaoishi katika mataifa ya Mashariki ya Kati wajaa hofu ya kushambuliwa. Iran yesterday said we need not to worry about any attacks that would possibly be aimed at Kenya, because they say that is it a missile program that the range is a bit too far, about 2,000 and something thereabout, that we cannot really get attacked, even as we also host some of the US air bases in the country, but are not too big to cause alarm for the people of Iran.
Yeah, so it's a good assurance.
Yeah.
But it's also, sometimes they speak diplomatically. Yeah, so if they're targeting all these American installations around, well, we don't know if that is just an assurance from a diplomatic speak. We are not really, but of course we have to say, every person has to be just armed and prepared in light of what is happening. You can just be resting on your laurels. Yeah, you can't. You can take chances. So also our military, they have to be on the alert. Anything could happen right now, because we have some of these countries also around here. Sudan, we have even South Sudan as well. We have people who have geopolitical interest around some of those Horn of Africa countries. Somalia here also has been steeped in war for the longest time. So we cannot just say, oh, that is a faraway war. It cannot reach us. Yeah, you never know how these concentric circles will just widen and affect you in some way.
We might be casualties. You think so?
I'm not saying we might be. I'm just saying be prepared. Be on the alert. Be on the lookout.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, that's the main story on the front page of Taifa Leo this morning. It's also covered on page 2 and 8, and other quick headlines. Mgogoro wa ndoa ya ODM na UDA wa chacha. Kundi la waasi lataka ushirikiano wa Ruto na ODM uvunjwe kwa kutotimizwa ahadi. Urafiki tata wa Ng'eno. Kuna watu watatu hapa: Rais William Ruto, Johana Ng'eno na Rigathi Gachagua. Maswali yamezidi kuibuka kuhusu msimamo wa kisiasa wa mbunge wa Emurua Dikir, huyo ni Johana Ng'eno, ambaye aliaga dunia Jumamosi katika ajali ya helikopta. Hii ni baada ya aliyekuwa naibu wa rais Rigathi Gachagua kutoa madai yaliyoashiria kuwa alikuwa na uhusiano wa karibu wa kisiasa na mbunge huyo aliyekuwa akihudumu kwa muhula wake wa 3. Ni habari katika kurasa wa 2. Kule juu, koti ya Zima aliyekosa mchango wa WhatsApp alishtaki kundi la kijamii katika WhatsApp kwa kutomchangia. Oh, wow. Na masuala ya spoti pale imezungumziwa. Real waweka ofa mezani kusajili Rodri. Pata uhondo wa spoti, udaku, bashiri, ratiba na matokeo katika jarida Bomba katika ukurasa wa 13 wa gazeti hili Taifa Leo.
All right, up next is Standard. You won't believe it, Adani knocking again. Right? They have the temerity. They have a chick to do it, and this is what is headlining the front page of the Standard this morning. The current orders issued have perpetually limited my clients, that is the Kenya Airport Authority, and most especially Adani Group, since we intend to initiate a fresh process for the redevelopment of the airport. And this is the Benson Oduwopar, the Kenya Airports Authority lawyer, and Tony Gashoka, an activist, saying that what's clear is that Ruto's government is looking for any legal path void of public participation. A conservatory order, as issued by the High Court, is a 360-degree protection for the JKIA from Adani or any other party from touching our airport. Very significant, of course. We are holding court also with Tony Gashoka just last week regarding this. They've moved to court also to get conservative orders on the sale of Safaricom, and it's still on Adani, saying these are public institutions that need to be protected, and public participation is very key, so that we don't know if there are any nefarious activities around it, if the proper financial or procurement proprieties followed, so that is not really floated, that includes also the public participation, and is not one single sourcing, that it has been advertised, and everyone has done also, a public bidding, then that can be said to be a clean deal that has transpired. This is a cunning maneuvers, one of the stormiest issues, they say here, that shook the Ruto administration in the aftermath of the Gen Z protest nearly 2 years ago was a plan to lease a key national asset, Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, to controversial Indian billionaire Adani under the guise of upgrading it. Now, days after a fresh court session on the matter, members of the opposition claim state operators are hunting for legal loopholes to quietly push Adani back into a deal on JK. You have a story well fleshed out for you on page 4 and 5 of today's publication of The Standard. And also just flipping back on the sports page, it's only God who will save Vatoto Vamungu from relegation. That is what we have on the back page of the sports segment of The Standard. 3 teams will be relegated to the Super League automatically at end of the season. Bidco out of bottom 3. That is after win over Ulinzi as Sofapaka. APS, Bomet lose again. You have all the gritty details there on the back page. While Liverpool's slot does not like set-piece trend. If you're also a football buff, you can follow that on the back page of The Standard.
All right, let's take a look at the People Daily this morning. Talks about what's currently happening in the northeastern region. Kenya's broken food security plan, it has been covered in page 4. People Daily calls it a starving nation. You know that 23 counties in this country, the ASAL counties,
yes,
facing drought and starvation. About 3.3 million people have been affected so far. So this newspaper is asking, where are we going wrong with regard to food security? What is the government doing to protect these people, these 3.3 million people in the northeastern region? Starving nation, Kenya's broken food security. And it's also raining. That means as there are other counties who are also getting affected by the floods that are being experienced across various parts in the country, which of course the weatherman has already issued an alert to those areas to be quite careful with the floods even as the rains continue. So what happens to the other 23 counties, the 3.3 million people who are facing starvation in the northeastern region? So
careful means what? Moving to the higher grounds. Move to the higher grounds.
Move to the higher grounds?
Which are the higher grounds? Who's higher grounds?
Which higher grounds?
So this is where they're left actually on the sharpest edge of the horns of a dilemma.
Yeah.
You're told to move to the higher grounds, the flash floods are here, they're going to affect you adversely. Yeah. So you've been living there for all your life. You're wondering which is the higher ground. Yeah. You go to the mountains or what, to the mountain coves, you tuck yourself there on the crevices. They should speak very clearly if government should give alternatives, even if it's a camp somewhere that has been set up, for them to move to the higher grounds. Give an alternative. Just don't tell, move to the... All of you, en masse, move to the higher grounds.
But as early as now. You remember what happened in Mai, I think last year but one? It was too late by the time, whatever happened, the tragedy that occurred in Mai happened. Then it was late when they were now being transferred to these camps for rescue. So if at all the weatherman is issuing an alert, why not start as early as now to try and avert maybe something that would become worse as in comparison to what we saw in Mahimayu in 2020. Was it 2023 or 2024? 2025, thereabout. So that's the main story on the front page of the People Daily this morning. Other quick headlines: Auditor General, land meant for children's institutions grabbed. That's a story covered on page. This is page 6 of the People Daily. And as World remembers Wangari Maathai, is Karura at risk again? Is a question People Daily is asking on page 11. You're talking about environment today, Diba?
Yeah. Very, very important. Of course, we'll be having Wanjira Maathai to tell us more on that particular question. Very pivotal, right? We remember Wangari Maathai, Karura is at risk. People have been talking about the NOS setting a barracks there.
Yeah.
And this has raised questions. This is one of the pivotal, carbon sink and the lungs of a city. The clean air that as we're coming here, other parts of the city, it is dry as a crunch. But when you come to Karura, you'll find showers. And this is just because of the canopy of forest that we have around as well. We shall be discussing that much, much later.
All right.
All right, we have the business daily. Let's buckle down to business. I just alluded to the fact that this global tensions that is arising right now because of Iran and USA-Israeli war is bound to be affecting us. And this will derail talks on the 5.6 billion shillings Kenya tea deal. Right now that you're sipping and knocking back your tea, this can actually be expensive for us as well, losing this revenue to export to Iran. Negotiations sought to lift export blockade. Nairobi goes slow on fears of upsetting U.S. Gulf state. This is where you have to be very also keen on how you can balance your leanings. And once you show like the way we can see it on the front page of a Daily Nation, it's bound to affect you in one way or the other. We've seen also how U.S., especially the Senate, has been railing Kenya because of our association with some of these countries, saying that we are not loyal. Yeah, so we are two-timing, and it's very key. Talks between Kenya and Iran on the resumption of tea exports. That's very key. Also, still on the front page of the Business Daily, bank profits rise 20% to hit 311 billion shillings on lower costs, right? If you want to just get to business, get to banking. I've never seen super profits, super normal profits all the time. And this story is tucked away on page 4 of the Business Daily this morning. I think because one of their single most biggest customer is the government, and that also affects the local borrowing. On the ticker, MPs seek powers to inspect 80 billion shillings securitized revenues. The National Assembly wants powers to inspect the securitization of government revenue streams in the funding of key projects, it says there. And shares trading costs to rise on higher CDSC fees plan on page 14 is where you can find that particular story. That is the Business Daily. Quickly, finally, the Star Rigathi deal.
Finally, brethren. A lifeline or landmine for Sifuna camp. Analysts warn reaction of core support base, the biggest risk. What is this deal that Rigathi is offering the Sifuna camp? Linda Wananchi. What is the deal? This story is on page 6.
Well, the deal has been there. Sifuna has indicated that we shall not be shy or greatly shy to work with people of like-mindedness. And of course, there could be that particular faction of ODM joining Rigathi Gachagua. So we are waiting to see how. What will determine is this March, 27th. Everyone is eagerly waiting to see what will be the outcome of and the survival and the future of ODM.
That's the story on page 6. The quick header is here. Hooked to machine, hoping for India. Fiona's 9 million shillings plea. Duale on share reforms, fraud crackdowns, cancer cover, digital health. That's a special coverage here on the front page of the Star. On the top strip, talks matters in security, gun capital, crime surge in city as cops scramble for answers. That's the Star this morning. Being a Tuesday, the Star is not for sale. Grab a copy free of charge. Let's take a look at the caricatures this morning. And we start off with the one on the Daily Nation. Talks about the passport saga. Warlords and political brokers, how it's easy for them to just go in and get the passports. On the other side, we see Kenyan citizens, how there's the bricks, something blocking Kenyans from easily accessing these passports. And then you have expatriates. ATM, how, they just do some calculations, some money, and then, they get passports so easily. That's the caricature and the Daily Nation this morning.
And that's the reality, all right? For you, will queue all day long. But for them, it just scams us so easily when some money is